How many of you are prepared for an incident like this? Get my new book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and I will teach you to think like an attacker so you can truly defend yourself. Don't just react, act. Available for pre-order now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Sheep No More. Get it.
My name is Jonathan Gillum.
And this is The Experts. This is Jonathan Gillum, and this is The Experts on Facebook Live, Twitter, and YouTube. And it looks like I'm doing a little dramatics there when it's black and the camera's not turned on, but that's just because I forgot to turn the camera on, so I try to do it with the music to make it look good. But in all transparency, I have to tell you that's what the truth is. That's what we do here. So we're going to talk a little bit tonight. Of course, you can't skip over Al Frankin, who I'm going to go out on a limb and say is a sexual predator. We're going to talk a little bit about Senator Menendez trial and that he should be retried. This is got fishiness all over it. And then there was a tweet today by an individual called Resistance Man, as a part of the Resistance, you know, that Resistance, that was retweeted by the DOD after he said that Trump should be removed from office. So we're going to talk about all this stuff. Let's go ahead and get started now. How many of you are prepared for an incident like this? Get my new book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and I will teach you to think like an attacker so you can truly defend yourself. Don't just react, act. Available for pre-order now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Sheep No More. Get it. Okay, so I just had the most hodgepodge dinner I think I've had in a long time, where it looked like I was eating Middle Eastern style. Like I had meat out there and hummus and raw vegetables, and I just cramming that stuff down before the show. And I feel like a real man. All I needed was a huge turkey leg, and it would have been perfect, just like something out of the movies. But speaking of men, let's talk about something 180 degrees out from a man. Let's talk about Al Frankin, and let's talk about what a sexual predator actually is. Okay, having been in law enforcement and having dealt, I went through the NYPD's homicide course, which is one of the premier homicide investigative courses that you can go through. I went through that when I was on the criminal side of the house here in New York City. And a lot of the stuff that we talked about, and a lot of stuff that we got briefed on with serial killers, for instance, when we were in the FBI Academy, and different things that I've studied along the way, have to do with sexual deviation. And Al Frankin, listen, it's not just what he did with Leanne Tweeden. His sense of humor, which I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm a huge comic fan. I have a good friend that owns Gotham Comedy Club here in New York City. He's an amazing guy, and I know a lot of comics, and I've met a lot of comics who have emotional issues. I mean, I don't think that that's justification for anything, but that's a lot of times where their comedy comes from, the dark side of who they are. And Al Frankin, I was going to say before he became a senator, but his time as a senator is kind of a joke as well. I don't know how that guy keeps getting elected, but because he's just another one of these Anthony Weiner loudmouth types that you never hear of Al Frankin or really any of these people in the Senate or Congress really of ever doing anything groundbreaking. I'm not going to talk about taxes tonight because I don't know enough about this whole tax thing to talk about, but I think it's a perfect example of what I've been briefed on so far, is that it doesn't do anything for anybody really. It's just another tax program that was passed, and it's not like they fixed anything. It's not like they lowered the taxes a tremendous amount. It's not like they made it fair and even across the board. It's not like we are now going to have a flat tax for everything. You're going to be spending the same thing next year as you spent this year. I don't care if you have to do the taxes on a like a postcard size thing, or if you have to do it on the side of a door. It doesn't matter. Paul Ryan is a liar, and Paul Ryan and the rest of them, they think you're stupid. Okay, and by and large, we're not stupid. The problem is that we're lazy, and I say this all the time, that we all should know, and I'm guilty of this, all right? We should all know the reality, not now, not tomorrow. We should have known the reality of what this tax plan actually is, the entire time they've been pushing this thing along, and we should have been saying, no, no, no. We want less tax. The federal government wastes too much money. We want a flat tax. We want – I don't care if you're a billionaire or if you're worth, if you make $50,000 a year. We want a flat tax. China does 15% flat tax, and they're just zooming forward. Your dollars don't just get taxed by the federal government. They get taxed by state and local government. They get taxed when you take a loan out. They get taxed when you buy gas. It gets taxed when you purchase anything. You go eat food. For the very food that goes in your body, gives you energy, you're going to get taxed for it. So those are things I do know about taxes, right? But the whole point of it is you're getting taxed to the point where you're only – well, I can't even say that you're making 40 cents out of the dollar, because here's the facts. 100% of your money that you make will have a tax added onto it. So the reality is, if you make $100,000 a year, let's say you take home $100,000 a year, that's a pretty good paycheck, right? And you spend 40,000. Let's say I'm not a mathematician. I'm going to screw this up, but I'm trying to use an example. You take $100,000 home every year. You put some of it in the bank. That money, and you put it in a savings account, or you put it in whatever thing that you have at where you invest your money. That money will sit there. When you take it out, guess what? It's going to be taxed. Okay, so that means already. So let's say you put 50 grand in savings, right? When you take that out, you're going to pay taxes on that 50 grand. Okay, so already you're getting less than 50. Well, you may make interest in this stuff, so ultimately you're still going to be paying on that money. The rest of that money, if you buy food, if you pay rent, if you go out and get a car and you got to pay that car off, you got school that you got to pay for, all that stuff is going to have taxes added onto it. Somewhere along the way, that money is going to be taxed. So the reality is, if your bills are let's say they add up to $40,000 a year, if you look at those bills, including food and all that other stuff, the reality is you may be paying, I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm trying to make a point here. What you're actually paying for rent and your bills and your food and all this stuff may be $20,000 or $25,000, but the rest of that money that you're actually spending on it, that you're paying to the stores and all this other stuff, that's taxes. So you're getting taxed when you make your money and you get your paycheck. Basically half the check comes out there. You know, when you have to pay to the state and local, they also get money from the federal government, right? So you're paying the federal government, then you're paying the state and your city in a lot of cases, and then they actually receive money from the federal government, so which means they're getting more of your tax dollars than they're letting on. And then when you go and buy stuff, that's also being taxed. Basically, you're not saving any money. It's all going to be taxed. So that's what I do know about taxes. Where was I getting off on this? The fact is, when I was talking about Al Frankin, when I'm talking about the rest of these senators and congressmen, they don't do anything. Al Frankin is one of these people. He doesn't do anything. There's nothing but hot air comes out of his mouth. Now, when you look at what he has done, it's not alleged, all right? It's not alleged when you have this. Let's see here. When you have a picture, this comes off of foxnews.com, and he says there's no excuse for it. So there's nothing alleged about that, all right? He's doing that to Leanne Tweeden, and she's asleep. And there's nothing alleged about when he did a rehearsal with her and shoved his tongue down her throat. Why don't we just listen to Leanne Tweeden tell the whole story here, and then we'll talk about it some more. Hold on one second here. Hold on there, Leanne.
Is this the time I tell my story? And I was just looking online and trying to find videos and, recalling everything that happened in my mind from this time 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And I found a blog of a soldier who was at one of our shows in Afghanistan or Iraq. And he just talks about his experience at the show just as a guy in the audience. And he said, Al Frankin and Leanne Tweeden were great co-MCs, and Al told a couple of jokes, and then Al goes in for a kiss or more from Leanne and fails. And I just thought, yeah, that's exactly what happens. And he failed every time, because that's what happens on stage. And, I thought it would be, the joke would always have been, to me, the funny part was, it would have been like Al would have, in my mind, Al would have just come in for a kiss, and I would have turned my face, or I would have put my hand on his mouth, and that would have been the funny part, right? That would have been like this old guy coming in for the kiss from the hot girl or whatever. The skit would have been to these young troops, and it would have been funny because it was comedy, right? Obviously, it turned out completely different, but, so I had to act my way through the rest of the shows for the next 2 weeks, 10 days, 2 weeks. And I just made sure I was never alone with him again. I didn't tell the Sergeant Major of the Army what happened. I didn't tell our USO rep, because what was I going to do? be the troublemaker, be like, okay, I'm going to MC every part of the show for the hour except the 10 minutes I'm on stage with Al. You know, I just sucked it up. I'm a strong girl. I'm a sportscaster, so I deal with guys every day. I'm just going to fake it and act like an actress and do this part with him and then not talk to him for the rest of rest of the tour. I mean, it was a big tour with a lot of people. I just didn't.
I'm going to play another part of this.
Just me and Al backstage, and he had his little props for the rest of his show, for the rest of his little skits by himself. And he's like, well, we need to practice the kissing scene. And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. And I just sort of blew him off because I didn't, we don't need to practice the kissing scene. It's just a quick little thing, you know. And then he persisted, and he's like, no, we really need to practice the kissing scene. And like, okay, Al, you just turn your head right, I'll turn my head right, we got this, you know, whatever. And he kept persisting, and I'm like, Al, this isn't SNL. We're not really going to kiss, so we don't really have to practice. And he just kept persisting, and it just reminded me of like the Harvey Weinstein tape that you heard the girl when she was wired up for the the NYPD, and he just persistent and badgering and just relentless, you know. And so I was just like, okay, fine, just so he would shut up, you know. And he just sort of came at me, and we did the line, and he came at me, and before you even know it, I mean, you kind of get close, and he just put his hand on the back of my head, and he mashed his face against, I mean, it happened so fast, and he just mashed his lips against my face, and he stuck his tongue in my mouth so fast. And all I can remember is that his lips were really wet, and it was slimy. In my mind, I called him fish lips the rest of the trip because that's just what it reminded me of. I don't know why. And he stuck his tongue down my mouth, and I remember I pushed him off with my hands, and I just remember I almost punched him, so because every time I see him now, like, my hands clench into fists, and I'm sure that's probably why. And I said, if you ever do that to me again, I'm not going to be so nice about it the second time. And I just walked out away from him, and I walked out, and I just wanted to find a bathroom, and I just wanted to rinse my mouth out because I was just disgusted, you know. It was just one of those I don't know, I was violated. I just felt like, you know, he betrayed my trust, and it obviously that is not what I wanted, and I felt like he wrote that just to get that piece in because he knew he wasn't going to get it on stage, and that was why he was badgering me to do it then when we were alone, because that's what he wanted. And then, you know, 5 minutes later, we had to go out on stage. I had to be an actress, you know. I had to go out on stage with this guy who just did this to me 5 minutes before and act like he's my best friend and Al Frankin, ladies and gentlemen, and this is the greatest thing ever, and do our lines. And trust me, he didn't even get close to my face when we had to come in for the kissing scene. And I mean, look, I was afraid to speak out 11 years ago. I wanted to say something, and there were people around me who said, oh my God, you will get annihilated and you will never work in this town again. And I was afraid of that. I really was afraid of that. You know, I was working at the Best Damn Sports Show. I was working at Fox Sports. I mean, I had a good career, and I thought, you know what, if I come out and speak out then, I probably would get fired or would just get phased out. And I was afraid of that, you know, and I'm not afraid of that anymore. I mean, could it still happen? Sure, possibly, but you know, I'm a lot more secure and you know, myself, my career at this age now, and I really do think the tide has turned.
Wow. So, folks, that of course comes off of NBC News, off of YouTube. That is crazy. Now, she went on to say that when it came to this picture right here, this is on foxnews.com, that she didn't even know that this picture was taken until later. And this picture's been around for some time. I think I was on Sean Hannity's radio show today. He said that he's known about that picture for 11 years. So that picture's been around for quite some time. But Leanne, from what I gather from what she was saying there, you know, she was like the rest of these women where she felt like she was in fear. Now, here's the thing about where I talked about earlier in this week that I think women and HR, not just women, but HR in companies and the court of public opinion need to get to this point, okay? They need to get to a point where when somebody does something like this and the person comes out, we need to be rational, first of all, okay? Because there are women, and we've talked about this before, there are women who've made false accusations, okay? So you cannot rush to judgment, period. Now, I think Sean Hannity said that on his TV and radio show about Judge Roy Moore. I agree. I think you have to get the evidence and take it in before you make a decision. The court of public opinion is often wrong, and the fact is the court of public opinion is really more of the sheep following whoever is telling them this is the truth. And quite frankly, you can ruin somebody's life and their career by allowing the information that's coming into the court of public opinion to influence the truth and how you see things. So that's first and foremost, okay? But what I want to see change here is when something like that happens, what I want to see is protection for people. So if somebody came out, like immediately, if she'd come out and said this happened and it was intrusive. I mean, the reality is the fact that I know this sounds weird and I don't want it to sound disgusting, but this is from a legal standpoint. The fact that he entered her body, that could be construed by a defense attorney or a prosecution, excuse me, as what they call, and I may be wrong about this, but I think I'm right. Sodomy is not just what everybody thinks they hear in the news, that it has to do with one actual orifice of the body. Sodomy is really when you do anything to somebody when you enter into a body cavity. So technically, grabbing somebody and shoving your throat or your tongue down their throat could possibly be prosecuted as that, maybe. And I think I don't know if there's that much difference is going to be looked at in the future in the court system from somebody grabbing a girl and sticking their hand up their skirt versus somebody grabbing the back of their head and sticking their tongue in their mouth. So if it's a unwanted, intrusive sexual advance, that's one thing. But if it's an unwanted sexual intrusion inside the body, that's a completely other thing. That's a felony. So making an advance against somebody at work, for instance, that goes against workplace sexual harassment or whatever if it's multiple times. You see, the problem where we're getting at with this stuff today is that in this day and age is that we don't think things through in this country, right? Already we should be having a discussion and we should be setting standards of how, not just standards of how a business says, okay, from now on we're going to report these things and blah, blah. We forget about that crap. We should start forget about the government and they're going to look into this stuff. Forget about those people. What we should be doing is having real discussions and real support mechanisms for when somebody says or has been sexually assaulted, like in this case, and that was assault. What Al Frankin did was assault. And I'm going to go more into a minute why I think Al Frankin's a sexual predator. But yes, that was assault. And we need to have a better, more supportive way for women to come out when it happens. It's much more credible if they report it when it happens. So the conversation needs to be as such where if somebody reports something happened, we don't automatically crucify the other person. In the case of rape, when women do go forward and they go and they say, I was raped, typically they're taken to the hospital and a rape kit is performed, and that way they can see if there's DNA, and typically there's DNA if they were raped from the individual that did it. And so there's a system, a legal system, in the way they can identify whether or not through evidence that this rape actually happened. I think when we look at things like happened to Leanne Tweeden, things that like in the case if Judge Roy Moore's accuser is truthful and that happened 40 years ago, let's say it happened today, that there would be certain types of investigation, interviews, and so on and so forth that it could be done where you try to verify these things. We're not having that conversation. We're not having that conversation. So I think what's going to happen in a year is there's still going to be false accusations with men being falsely accused. I think there's still going to be women that are getting molested or even raped that won't want to come forward because they fear for their jobs. And in the case of Harvey Weinstein's or Al Franken's or the senators and congressmen who touch inappropriately and I'm sure rape their aides, and things have been done up there on Capitol Hill, people don't want to come forward. It's still going to happen. Why? Because we don't, as a citizenry, we don't get together and say, okay, we need to come up with a system for the court of public opinion and how we look at this, and we must insist that this is the way these things are covered by the press and how they're looked at by investigators, and how this information is also reported and leaked by people who are trying to be the accusers, right? I think everybody should be held to a standard. And I know that's hard for people who say, well, I've been raped, and you're saying that I have to be held to a standard. I believe that we should have standards for how you report this stuff. And I think that if we do that, what is going to happen is hopefully there'll be protection and support mechanisms that come into place. HR should, once somebody makes an accusation, they should come under the full protection of the legal system, where if that person that they complained upon, like the Harvey Weinsteins, try to have retribution on them, and they say, for instance, I've never had a part in a movie since then investigators should be able to go out and look and see and do interviews and find out if this is a repetitive thing. But therein lies also the problem, is that not just the court of public opinion, but also in the case of the Weinsteins or the Al Frankins, whenever somebody lords power over another person, whether, if they can ruin their career, you're going to have a problem. And that's why a lot of the times, like Leanne said, that she was more mature now and she can handle it. The fact is, she may not have been any less mature then. The fact is that she was new in her career, and now she's not. She's much more settled, and she's not afraid of her career anymore. She doesn't have to prove that she is or she doesn't have to worry about somebody trying to spread the word around that you can't be around her. You got to watch her; she'll turn you in. So there's still going to be problems, even if we fix all this stuff, even if we come to conclusions that it should be reported this way, and we should make sure that we have the evidence so that this person doesn't get wrongfully accused or charged, and we must make it so that just because this person's powerful, that we have to say that the woman is automatically a liar. And I think in the case of Judge Roy Moore, what I see on both sides is I see people, you can't say anything about it, or else they're saying you're some kind of weird sexist. You're trying to say that Roy Moore is a saint. Well, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. And then you got the other side that say, I can't believe this woman is obviously lying because she waited 40 years. Well, I'm not saying that, and that's not necessarily true either. So the interesting thing about all this is, I tried to articulate this on Sean's show today. I don't think I did. Is that the Bill Clinton era really was the beginning of the end for people who like to use their official position to touch or creep on women. Okay, that was really the beginning of the end, because it came to light big time. Now, it took from that point to now for it to really come to a head, mostly because of people like Hillary Clinton that went after the women that made these accusations. So what we were seeing then was still liberal types like Bill Clinton, and there were conservative types too. Listen, forget about the liberal and conservative. There's weirdos in Washington, D.C., and they've done not all of them, but a lot of them have done stuff like this. And almost all of them that did it, it was covered up in one way, shape, or form. I just talked about early in the week how they are using taxpayer monies to pay off some of these people. So Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton was the one that kind of, popped the pimple of nastiness and nefarious behavior of these people. And Hillary Clinton was the one that was over there doctoring it up, trying to intimidate the women that were accusing him. Well, now I flash forward this many years later, and what you see is there's been so many activists coming out and I would say going far beyond what is called for in political correctness, to the point where I just pretty much just keep my mouth shut and don't look at women if I'm in a work environment. I'm very careful around people. I've been very surprised before, like Ashley Judd, when she was going through the airport and that TSA guy said, you look very nice today, sweetheart, and she got all freaked out because of that. I've seen that before, and I just stay away from that. I don't even try to go down that road. And unfortunately, that's a bad way to live in life, because you can't even say to somebody, you look lovely today. They may take that in the completely wrong way, and then what happens, you could get, accused of making sexual advances to somebody when you're not. So, but listen, these leftist activists have taken us down this road, and whereas that's the bad side of it, the good side of it is the leftists and the weirdos on the right that are chronic sexual abusers and predators. Women are starting to feel empowered, and they're all coming to light and saying that these things happened, and so I foresee a couple things happening here. I foresee women starting to become more empowered. I think it's going to start to become more and more evidence, and this is where I think the American people are very smart. It's going to become more and more evident when somebody's lying and when they're not. So really, the other people are going to get screwed out of this, and rightfully so, are the people that make false accusations. It's going to become more and more apparent. And I hope that people like the Gloria Allreds, they go away, because as soon as she raises her head, that something's going to go, that there's going to be some kind of political attachment to this, and that some type of nefarious behavior is happening, her and her daughter both. So the other thing that I think is going to happen down the road is that as long as the women continue to come out and be empowered to say these things, what you're going to see is complete chaos of what people can and cannot say to each other in an appropriate way. It's going to be chaos. I mean, we're going down this road of I don't know what you would want to call it, but it's complete confusion. So hold on, let me see something here. I don't know if let me read what Kay is saying here. She says, "I'm sorry, there is a line drawn with the career thing. If someone wants or tries to force you to do something that is illegal, immoral, against your will, belief, etc., find another career or job. If you're willing to put up with it, that's on you." I mean, it's still a crime. It's still a crime, okay? And I don't know what to say about that about that comment. It's a little interesting there. I mean, because somebody puts up with it doesn't mean that how can I put this? They may be in a position where they work their entire life to get to this point, and now they run up against this wall, and somebody keeps coming at them and keeps coming at them, and maybe something happens once where they force themselves on them, and they say, okay, all right, I'm not going to do anything because I don't want to lose my career. I don't want this going haywire, so I'm just going to act like it never happened again. And then that person tries to lord over them. Here's the facts, okay? It's all bad. And predators prey on this type of situation. They thrive in this situation because what they do is they get women in a position where they have them in a bind, and then they manipulate these systems. It's unethical, it's immoral, and I don't believe that women that are in this situation most of the time, unless they're also psychopathic deviants trying to work their way to the top, and there are women like that, there's men like that, can't say that there's not, but I think by and large what actually happens is that women get caught, and psychologically, I mean, listen, I learned about interrogation and investigations. I can guarantee you I can take almost any one of you in a situation, and if I'm trying to get information out of you because you did something wrong, I can put you in situations and either make you think that I'm your friend where you give me the information, or I can make you feel like I have complete power over you, and if you don't give me the information, I'm going to ruin your life. I mean, I can do that. I know that the psychological ways to manipulate people in that way when it comes to law enforcement. And psychopaths and narcissists, they get their jollies off that. My jollies in the FBI was not necessarily doing that, although it is interesting when you get to see criminals cry. But they always cry because they got caught. They don't cry because they're sad or they're remorseful. They cry because they got caught. But it's very fulfilling to see justice done. And I think in the cases what we're talking about here is that ultimately women get into these positions. They could have made a bad choice, or maybe they made there was no choice that they had to make at all. It doesn't really matter. What these people are doing, these predators, is illegal. It's immoral. It's unethical. Now, we don't live in caves anymore, so if I see a hot girl, I can't just go over, hit her on the top of the head, and drag her to my cave. That doesn't work anymore. That's not the way things work in a civil society. We have laws. We have ethics. We have morals. I don't think my Lord and Savior Jesus would like it too much if I started clubbing women over the head and dragging them back to my cave. So, and I'm old-fashioned in the way I like it when a girl likes me. Not that I have to, take force over them. But there are a lot of people, a lot of power players in this world, and that's what they want. They want people to be subordinate to them. And they want people to, they want to wield their power. And they have little to no conscience over what they're doing when they do it. Al Frankin, I think Al Frankin is an idiot. And I think Al Frankin is a grown boy. Although there may be a very dark side to this individual. I don't know. We haven't dove into it enough. But where I will tell you, and I'm going to bring up the sound effect on this, the sound bite, where I do think, and I agree with Vince here saying, I just want to say this one other thing. I don't think you should have to find a new job. I think the person that's done this to you should have to find a new job and should probably go to jail for, I think the rules with, we should make the rules for retaliation heavy. I'm not talking about, you go to a nice prison. I'm talking you go to a pipe hitting prison. And I also think that we should make the rules or the laws heavy when it comes to sexual harassment in the workplace, because but I think we need to be careful with that. We need to define what sexual harassment is very carefully, and we need to say, okay, if somebody is making forward passes at somebody just because they're interested in them and they happen to be at work, that's different. I think that's different. People could say I'm wrong with that. I think that's different than if you are somebody who makes a pass at somebody and says, I think you're pretty, I'd like to go out with you. That I don't think is sexual harassment. But if the person turns around and says, unless the policies are at that company, they say you can't do any of this. But let's say somebody comes up and says, I think you're pretty, would you like to go out? And the woman says, no. As soon as she says no, and that person persists, that's sexual harassment. And now, I don't know the legal terms of this. I don't know exactly, but so I don't, I don't. Hold on a second. Let me read this for a second. I don't want to get in the middle of people arguing on here, but I think people are taking what each other is saying out of context on this, and on the chat sessions. So, here's the thing, folks. You got to be careful. You have to be careful when you are making comments in this situation, okay? You have to be careful when you're making comments about it, because if you haven't been in the situation, you have to be you have to look at this with an open mind. The only reason I'm even bringing this up again today on this show is because Al Frankin, it keeps coming up, but I'm trying to look at it from a different perspective. And the conversation I'm wanting to have here is I think we're losing ground in not talking about how women should react to this and what we should do to make sure they're empowered so that they can have the law behind them, so that HR can be behind them, and so that the community in which they work is behind them. I mean, almost every time I've ever heard of somebody saying, I was touched by this person, I was sexually assaulted, or I had sexually harassed, I'm not kidding you, almost every single time, you know what I'm talking about, it's not the first time. And there's many, many people that say that person's weird, they seem like a sexual predator, and so on and so forth. So, and I'm not going to call you, Kitty, and I'm going to tell you why I'm not going to call you. I'm not going to call you because I don't want to get into the conversation about, I'm not trying to get in the conversation about what defines sexual harassment. We'll end up talking about this all night long. What I'm saying is we need to have a conversation about how to empower people so that they have a voice, because that still is not being looked at right now. I can guarantee you in Hollywood right now, if somebody says no, they have run a risk of ruining their career. And that's the conversation we need to have. There's still going to be people getting molested. There's still going to be people getting raped. There's still going to be people getting sexually harassed. But how do we give them a voice? You're never going to stop the sexual predators. They're always going to be there. Why? Because the world is deviant. And the world is unethical, and it's not getting less unethical, it's getting more unethical. So you're not going to stop that. So the conversation that we need to start having is, how can we, the public, the citizenry, stand together with people when they say, I've been sexually harassed and I was kicked out of this area? How do we stand against the mafia of people who are the ones that are ruining people's careers, who are causing retribution? How do we stand against the people the Harvey Weinsteins, the Al Frankins? That's the question that we need to be asking, not debating on whether or not somebody should leave their job or whether or not somebody, should go the distance in order to make them. Forget that. We need to start asking the question of, how do we empower people so that they have a voice? They don't have to wait 30 years, and that when they make an accusation, it is taken seriously without crushing the people, the men who didn't do anything, because there are going to be those, especially in a political setting. There has to be a standard way that we do this, and the only way we can do this is if we back people in saying, if you're not the one to blame, like Leanne Tweeden said she didn't want to ruin her career. She should be able to come to people and they should say, you're not the one to blame. That person that did that is going to be removed. But we don't have it that way. Let me see what else is saying. Vince wants to know, how do we eliminate this bizarre double standard? That's the question. How do we eliminate these bizarre double standards? This is the conversation that we're having now is so precarious because people are so angry, and everybody has an opinion, and it's going to be volatile. And I'm going to give you, Kitty, I'm going to give you your day to talk. This is not the day. And I want you to understand why. I would not want John McCain speaking on a day when I'm talking about what the reality is of torture and how we should continue advanced interrogation, and what the difference is between torture and advanced interrogation. Why? Because John McCain was tortured. So it's going to be an emotional conversation with him. I don't want to have that emotional conversation tonight, because right now what I'm trying to do is slowly but confidently lead people into this conversation. And I think, and I know this sounds harsh, but the less we concentrate on what has been done to people, and the more we concentrate on what we do from this point forward to make sure that people have the support mechanisms that they need, I think we're going to be able to prevent these things. If we get emotional, the conversation breaks down. So what I want to do is have a time when I can have people who've had this happen and we have that discussion. And that will be a completely different discussion, because then we are going to see the emotion that and what actually happens to people when they are sexually assaulted, when in the cases of some people, not just sexually assaulted, but they attempted to kill them, when they were sexually harassed at work, and how some people feel like, that was no big deal. You know, your boss hit on you a couple times. It wasn't a big deal. But when they see the impact that it has on a person that's in the position that they're in, it's much different. And so I want to reserve that emotional time for that. And I don't want to compare these two things, but I will say that there are some similarities when it comes to the workplace with people like the Jeff Ringles of the world, the guy that was my last boss in the FBI, that decide they don't like somebody, and then instead of basing their opinion on their credentials or their efforts or their skill set, they go after them and try to ruin them, or they just discount them and shift them off into an office and never talk to them, or they constantly belittle them. I've seen people, not just to me, but I've had other bosses do this type of stuff, and although it's not a sexual pass on somebody, it's still the same type of power game that these weirdos use at their jobs. Instead of acting in a team effort, they act as a psychopath lording over like some kind of a lion. It's not just men. I've had women do the same thing, and when they get into positions of authority. So I think when we talk about work, that's going to be it's going to be an interesting conversation that I want to have with people who have been injured or that have been oppressed in their jobs sexually and by bad bosses. And I think this is something that the conversation that we need to have. I think that HR in companies need to have teeth. So I got my little dog down there walking around. It makes me nervous when he walks around like this. So I haven't even looked at Twitter to see what people are saying over here. Let me see here real quick. I want to play this other. Let me look at this other soundbite. I'm gonna have to look at what you guys say later. Stand by 1 second. Shouldn't have closed out YouTube. My laptop again is so slow. It's so slow. Come on. There it goes. So, what I said earlier about Al Frankin and what I put on the header about Al Frankin being a sexual predator, and people like Rob Reiner who support these weirdos, and who is a weirdo, I believe, and I believe Rob Reiner is a communist. He in the '60s he had communist tendencies. You could see the way his jokes were. You could see the things that he believed and all this.
See, as a baby,
so
Rob was.
Let me make sure I get a better audio of this. I think this is going to be it. So anyway, this is a Rob Reiner roast, and this is Al Frankin before he was a senator, I believe, making jokes about Rob Reiner being anally raped by not only his father but his father's friends, and I guess that's comedy, according to Al Frankin and Rob Reiner.
See, as a baby, Rob was routinely beaten.
Okay, that's a terrible audio. So let me see if I can get another audio of this.
This is terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes in the...
As a baby, Rob was routinely beaten by his father, Carl. On a typical night, Carl would slip into Rob's bed, roll him over, swab him down, and say something like, "I'm thinking about hiring Maury Amsterdam to play Buddy Sorrell. What do you think?" Well, the success of the Dick Van Dyke Show changed things dramatically. Carl started inviting many of his famous friends to son.
This is terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes in the world.
All right, so let's see if this is clear. I don't think it will be. I know that was hard to listen. That was hard to hear. Let me see if I can get it pulled up where he was saying this here. I mean, they get dirty in these roasts for sure. Stand by 1 second. All right, let's see here. Hold on. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get the whole with a better sound for that, unfortunately. But I think you guys get what he was saying there. Stand by.
Rob was routinely beaten.
Same thing.
By his father, Carl.
Okay, so basically what he was saying there, I'm sorry, I tried to get a better audio version of that. And basically what he was saying that his father allowed his friends to come over and have anal sex with his son. So for somebody to make a joke like that, they may, push the limits of comedy, which all these comedians are always saying that these are jokes, and so they should be able to be judged by a different standard. Well, when a comedian is also known like Louis C.K., another weirdo who tells the most raunchiest jokes, also about pedophilia. Louis C.K. said a joke about pedophiles. I think is one of the most disgusting things I've ever heard. And then he has his own issues where he likes to invite people up to his apartment without their permission, start masturbating, and which is the oddest thing ever. But so you see what type of weirdos they are when it goes from telling jokes to actual deviant acts, sexual acts. Now then, we have to start looking about whether or not they are actually a predator. And I think in the case of Al Frankin, when we listen to these jokes that he's telling, and then we look at the actions that he takes, which are in pictures and testimony from Leanne Tweeden, we start to see a different picture of this senator, which just makes me wonder how people don't review and do their investigations to see who these people are that are running for office actually are. So, I can guarantee you, it's not just Democrats. I guarantee you can look at Dennis Hastert, I think was his name, that ended up going to prison for basically payoffs when he was in office because he had sex with a kid many years before. I can guarantee it's not the only case where he did this. these are not one-offs. And if Al Franken's going to go and make jokes about a child being raped by by his father's friends, not just raped, offered up by his father, and then he goes and does these sexual things of where unwanted sexual touching, putting your tongue in somebody's mouth when they didn't ask for it. These are instances that kind of show me that there's a little bit more to the people than just somebody who is a comedian. Same thing with Louis C.K. Now, man, I've talked about that for a while. Let me go to the A block, and I want to talk real quick about Menendez, and then about the DOD. There was a tweet out. Well, I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but let's go to the A block. How many of you are prepared for an incident like this? Get my new book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and I will teach you to think like an attacker so you can truly defend yourself. Don't just react, act. Available for pre-order now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Sheep No More. Get it. And just in case you hear this massive amount of machinery behind me, evidently, well, this is last week, they went out and tore the road. In New York, they do this when they repave the roads. Although they're doing a good job here, they tore the whole upper layer of road off. And I guess tonight, all night, they're going to be repaving this road. So you're going to hear all kinds of stuff out there. By the way, I didn't tell everybody, I'm hosting for David Webb tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. I'll be back here tomorrow. I'm only going to do a very short show. I may just do the toast tomorrow, but I'll come up and do that. But if you have SiriusXM Patriot Channel 125 or SiriusXM and you have the app, you can listen from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. on SiriusXM Patriot Channel 125, and then tell everybody, okay? Everybody that watches this show needs to realize and know this, that next Tuesday, I'm going to be on NRA TV, and then on Wednesday, I'm going to host the Sean Hannity radio show. So that's going to be great because this is right before the book comes out in December 12th, and I'm going to cover a lot of what the book is all about. I'm going to actually go into detail for at least one segment on that show, a little bit more than I've even gone into detail here. So that'll be a great chance. If you have not bought the book, you can order it today. It's called Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. I should be putting this thing up, but I often don't. Not in front of my face. And basically, I'm going to give, the book is important that you buy this book. I think it's going to be important that you get it and you give it to as many people as possible so they can understand, at work, for instance, how you can start to identify where somebody will come up and sexually harass you or touch you or do whatever, and you can identify. The book is going to give you ways to identify where these things can happen. So I'm going to talk about that a lot next Wednesday on Sean's show. If you're driving to your wherever you're going for Thanksgiving and you're driving Wednesday, make sure that you tune in. That's 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's on radio stations all over the world and also on SiriusXM Patriot Channel 125. So if you have that, you can listen to it there as well. And it's going to be a good show. I'm already planning that. Whenever I do his show, it's always a big deal for me, and I try to put a lot of what I talk about in this show into that and really make it the whole show one event. So that's what we're going to be doing. And that's going to be the Sean Hannity Radio Show next Wednesday from 3 to 6 Eastern Standard Time, 3 to 6 p.m., and then tomorrow, David Webb Show, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., also on SiriusXM Patriot Channel 125. Now, one of the things we're going to most doubtedly talk about tomorrow is the Menendez trial. That's Senator Menendez. And let me pull this up here. It failed today. It was a hung jury, right? But now, what is with all these? Fox News just recalculated or recycled, and it's got married science teacher 22 arrested for sex romp with teen boy student. I remember when I know this is completely off the subject. I remember years ago, right, when I was younger, and up until just recent, like within the last couple of years, you rarely heard about a female teacher having an affair with a young boy. You never heard of it. You just didn't hear about it. It seems like every week there's like 3 of these people. And I'm not going to lie, they're all really pretty. And the male molesters are always these fat weirdos, or these, you can just see them. That you go like, that guy looks like a molester. But the women, what's wrong? What is going on psychologically with women these days? I'm talking about all women, but these women, these particular women. What is happening that this is becoming such a thing? I'm actually perplexed. Even having studied psychology in college, I'm perplexed by this. This is a growing epidemic of, and make no mistake about it, this is a sexual predator. Just because it's a pretty woman, they're still sexual predators, and they're going to have to register as sex offenders when they get out of prison. But this is just strange. It's like this growing epidemic of women teachers, female teachers, molesting students. I don't know. I don't remember. Maybe it's just me, but I don't remember this as being a thing before. Interesting. Menendez, hung jury. But the interesting thing about this whole case, I think there's plenty of evidence to show that he was doing these dealings. The jury, first of all, why'd they have this case in New Jersey, where he's from? All right, should not have had the case in New Jersey where he's from. Because he's a senator, because he holds a lot of power, I think they should have moved that to another court outside of New Jersey and tried this case. I don't think that the community got a fair trial. I heard earlier on FoxNews.com, and I was kind of surprised by this. Brett Baer and Judge Napolitano were talking and saying that he's found innocent. Well, he wasn't found innocent. And there is no such thing as innocent in a court of law. It's guilty or not guilty. So there is no innocent. And that's not what the court system is there for, to find you innocent. It's guilty or not guilty. But the jury was instructed not to read or listen to information about what he had done. They did. The judge didn't do anything about it. They had another juror that wanted to go on vacation. He allowed them to go on vacation, and that's when deliberation started. So the stand-in wasn't a part of the regular jury. I find that extremely odd that was allowed to happen. So when you look at the case of Menendez, again, what I'm seeing is not a hung trial. I'm seeing a senator that got away with stuff that would have put you and I in prison for a long, long time. And hold on a second here. So, there's a politically incorrect question I want to ask everybody, but I'm not going to ask it because I'm not going down that road. Everybody's already talking about it anyway. But with Menendez, what I'm seeing is another politician getting away with stuff that would put you and I in jail. And I don't agree with it. I think the government, I know it's going to cost a lot of money, but I'm sick and tired of these people getting away with it, and I think they should be hammered. And I think they should go after Menendez again, and they should try him again outside of New Jersey. He's crooked. Most of I don't know the statistics, I'll be honest, but there's a lot of corruption in politics in New Jersey, and I only know a few judges that I trust. I mean, the sheer fact that they're talking about any of these cases that could be tried here or there, whether the judge is Republican or Democrat, automatically tells you that they can't be trusted, because a judge should be neutral and impartial. And that's just not the case. That's about all I want to say about Menendez. I don't like him. I don't like looking at him. I think he's got a punchable face, and I think he's a liar and a criminal. Period. I do want to say one thing, though. There's been accusation made against Sylvester Stallone that he and his bodyguard sexually assaulted a 16-year-old many, many years ago. Let me pull this up here because I don't remember how many years ago it was. And this was reported immediately by the 16-year-old girl. It's when he was 40. He's now 70. Yeah, believe it or not, he's 70. And she went to the Las Vegas PD, and the Vegas PD said that there wasn't enough evidence to go forward on it, even though investigations happen all the time without evidence, just on circumstantial evidence to start an investigation. They decided not to do it. And it was Sylvester Stallone and his bodyguard. I looked his bodyguard up, and his bodyguard was actually killed by police a while back because he wouldn't do what they asked him to do. He said he had a gun. They tased him. It didn't work. When he came at him, they shot and killed him. So sounds a little bit like his bodyguard was a little nefarious, but the accusations that this girl is making, this woman, his bodyguard at the time, Sylvester Stallone was 40, his bodyguard was 27, and the girl was 16. She's not saying that she wouldn't have wanted to have sex with Sylvester Stallone. She was saying that he told her that they were both going to have sex with her, which they did, and she couldn't get out of it. And then they told her if she did anything, they were going to bust her head in. So she went to the police about it. The police declined to investigate it, and now she has come out about it this many years later. Now, here's the difference between that and the other stuff that we were talking about with Al Frankin, is that, I mean, this is rape. That's rape. If that's true, and I'm not going to say it's true, but the fact that she went to the police does kind of lead some credence to this, but that these are criminal charges. I think what Harvey Weinstein did was rape. And I think what Kevin Spacey did, unless there was more to it, was assault, sexual assault. Keep it coming, ladies. You're gaining power. So I want if it's happened to you, we want to hear it. I want women in America to know, if these people have done something to you, we stand with you. We want to hear it. And don't be afraid. Don't think you look bad. Don't think you look dirty or disgusting, or that we look down upon you. You're not dirty. You're not disgusting. You're an angel that has been attacked by Satan himself, and we need to know about it, and so we can stand with you, and so these dirtbags can be punished. That's what needs to happen. So if you've never come out against some of these people and you're listening to this show, we stand with you. So, hold on here a second here. Hold on a second. So, the other thing was I wanted to talk about real quick. So, let me pull this up real quick. This guy made this tweet today. Let me pull it up here. Doop. Al Frankin. I used to think he was funny when I was a kid. So, no, this isn't it. Okay. Basically what happened was, because I can't find it now, A guy known as I don't even want to say his name. He's on Twitter, and I don't know who the guy is, but it was Resistance Man or something like that, right? He writes a tweet. I doubt very seriously there's anything manly about this kid. In the tweet, he says that, basically saying that Judge Roy Moore should step down and not, and stop the process of trying to get elected. That he named a couple of other people, and then he said, and President Trump should leave office or should be kicked out or something like that about office. Let me see if it might be here. I don't know why I can't find it now. Hold on here. I don't want to get this wrongly tweeted. Oh, there it is. Okay, hold on. So the tweet said, Roy Moore stepped down from the race. Al Frankin resigned from Congress. Donald Trump resigned from the presidency. GOP, stop making sexual assault a partisan issue. It's a crime, as is your hypocrisy. Okay, so, a couple of things the guy said there I agree with. About I don't know yet about Roy Moore, but we still got to look at the reality of the facts there. I'm not saying Roy Moore is not guilty, but I want to wait a little bit longer on that. Al Franken, I think, should resign from the Senate. He's not in Congress. Or proud resistor. Yeah, proud resistor. That's what it was. But I don't think Donald Trump has any reason to resign from the presidency, and I don't think the GOP should be singled out as the only ones making sexual assault a partisan issue. That's the way politics have always been and always will be. They'll throw the blame at everybody else except for their own. Now, regardless of what I feel about that, that's not what I'm wanting to talk about. The Department of Defense's official Twitter retweeted that tweet. And it was up for just a short period of time, and then it was pulled down, but not before it was. There were pictures taken of it. Now, the official DOD response was from Dana White, who is the DOD spokesperson, said an authorized, not unauthorized, an authorized operator of the Defense Department. A Department of Defense official Twitter site erroneously retweeted content that would not be endorsed by the Department of Defense. The operator caught this error and immediately deleted it. So here's what I'm saying. First and foremost, how did the State Department see that this guy had tweeted anything? That's the very first thing. They're monitoring. So this guy, Proud Resistor, tweets something about President Trump, and the Defense Department's Twitter people saw it and retweeted it. By mistake. I'm not buying that. I don't think that this individual retweeted this by mistake. What I think happened was that the people that work in that office either did it on purpose, thinking that nobody was going to realize that they did it, or that the person, not the office, but the person that retweeted it is one of these leftists. That's what I believe. I don't believe this was a mistake at all. So I think they did it quickly to make a point, and then they undeleted it. Or, excuse me, they unshared it. That's what I believe happened. And yeah, I think it's just another sign of the nefarious, underhanded, leftist, communist, subversive movement that it's going on inside the Department of Defense. And it's just not really coincidental, but it's interesting how for 2 days I was ranting and raving on the reality of the DOD, and then lo and behold, here it comes, another example of what I'm talking about. What can I say? I'm right. All right. Come here, dog. He's just walking around all over the place. He's mall walking. Let's go to the Truth Zone. Again, tomorrow, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., I'll be hosting the David Webb Show on SiriusXM Patriot Channel 125. I'll then come on here tomorrow evening and do the Friday Night Toast short show, unless there's some big news, but probably a short show. I'll do the toast. And then I will be hosting, of course, I'll do my show next week, but I'll be hosting Sean Hannity radio show on Wednesday. And you're going to want to stay tuned for that because I'm going to share some big chunks of this book so that if you're teeter-totter whether or not you should buy it, you'll want to buy it after we talk about it. And on Tuesday, I believe it's Tuesday, I'm going to be on NRA TV. I'll give you some more information on that as well. The other thing I'm thinking about doing is the week after that, having a book reveal party. Now, I was thinking about having a virtual book reveal party and seeing if I can get some people to appear, some friends of mine. I'm not counting on this. I haven't tried to organize it yet. I'll see what, if we can get it done. And if anything, what I'll do is I'll take my camera and stuff and I'll either do it here or we'll go somewhere and we'll have it live where people can, come on and say things about the book and ask questions and so on and so forth. And that's what we'll do. And I guess that's about it. Let's go to the truth zone right now. Hold on. Right now. How many of you are prepared for an incident like this? Get my new book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and I will teach you to think like an attacker so you can truly defend yourself. Don't just react, act. Available for pre-order now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Sheep No More. Get it. I don't know about you guys, but I like this music. It just gets me fired up.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I keep looking over there. You're over there, yeah.
All right, here's the deal. Hope I didn't creep people out right there. All right. Make sure that if you're somebody who's been sexually harassed, or if you're somebody who's a friend of somebody who's been sexually harassed, let them know, and you should know, that you have people that stand with you. I think it's time that the men in this country, here's a big problem we got here, folks. I don't want the women to take offense to this, but here's the deal. It's been too long that the men in this country have been regressing to the point where when they walk into a room, a man should be noticed as having command presence. I think women can do that as well, but the point is, and you'll understand the point as I get there. We now have man boys. All right, they're grown-ups that are boys, like Al Frankin. We have sexual predators that women in certain career fields are afraid to stand up to because they're going to lose their careers or because these men are more powerful than they are. And yet other men fail to stand with those women because they're also afraid to lose their careers, or because they're deviant, or because they're too big a wimps to do what's right. This country has slowly been progressing down a road of she-men, of baby men, and the art of being a man has been lost, but by a few. And I think that we need to get back to a point where we have real men in this world, in this country. I can't say about the rest of the world. In this country, I'm an American. I'm freeborn. And I think that you don't have to be the biggest guy in the room. I don't think you have to be the meanest guy in the room. I don't think that you have to be a killer or a warrior to be a man. My little dog Rico over there is about 16 pounds. And I've seen him go against dogs 10 times his size. Why? Because that dog, who he is and the ferocity he has, comes from within. It doesn't just come from his size. Right, buddy? Here he is. So, the point I'm trying to make here is that in order to be a man, you don't have to be huge. You don't have to be powerful in a monetary way. You don't have to be somebody who, when you walk into a room, that everybody says he's the most handsome guy in the world. What you need to be is like this little Jack Russell right here. You need to naturally know what's right and wrong, and you need to be able to stand up to evil people for the right reasons. If we had more men in this world, we would have less abused women, we would have less sexual predators, we would have less criminals, we would have more ethics, more morals, we would have a stronger military, less corrupt politicians, we would have a safer country. But because men have forgotten how to be men, well, this country has forgotten how to be powerful. I'm Jonathan Gillum, this is Rico, and this is The Experts. The truth has arrived. How many of you are prepared for an incident like this? Get my new book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and I will teach you to think like an attacker so you can truly defend yourself. Don't just react, act. Available for pre-order now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Sheep No More. Get it.